Hi Year 11 and welcome to today's lesson. To start today, what I would like you to do is I'd like you to have a watch of the video which you can see below. You can access this video by going back into the lesson instructions on Google Classrooms, and it's under the title Video 1, The Great Green Wall. I'd like you to think about the lesson we looked at last week where we focused on desertification. And just to recap, what we mean by that term is that this is where land is gradually turned into desert, and it usually on the edges of existing deserts. And it can occur because of a number of reasons. We looked at those within last lesson. They can be things like overgrazing, livestock stripping vegetation. It might be the collection of firewood. It might be that the soil becomes exposed to the weather. It cracks and breaks up and begins to be eroded by the wind. So while you're thinking about that term desertification, I'd like you to watch the video, and while you're watching it, I want you to think about ways that the green wall might improve the lives of people living in the Sahel. And that is an area just south of the Sahara Desert. And you can see that band there which separates the Sahara from the savanna grasslands below. So while watching it, you can either make some notes in your book, or you can just start to think about how may it improve the lives of people living there. So now we understand what we mean by the term desertification, and we know the causes of why it happens. What we're going to do today is have a look at the managing or ways to reduce desertification in these areas. We know that up to 1 billion people could be affected by desertification in the future, and the challenges it poses for people that live there can be devastating. If we think about the people that live in these desert fringes, they're some of maybe the poorest people in the world, and desertification is just another challenge that they are going to have to overcome. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to get down today's title, which you can see at the top there, Managing or Reducing Desertification. And hopefully by the end of today's lesson, you're going to be able to state how we can manage the impacts of this issue. I'm hoping that if we just quickly look there at levels 8 and 9, that everyone's going to be able to give a detailed explanation as to how desertification can be reduced and include detailed examples of the reasons behind these strategies. So add that now into your book. So just to get us thinking about the cause of desertification before we lead into what we're going to do today, I'd like to have a look at the images below. The first task that I would like you to do is to try and tell what does each picture represent. And then I'd like you to think about how that picture might lead to desertification. So if you just write 1 to 6 in your book, and all you need to write down is the first task. The second, you can begin to think about how might that lead to desertification. Pause the PowerPoint now to complete this task. So within this slide here, I've provided you with some of the causes, which we're just going to talk through now. If we look at the first one there, that's population growth. And this can result in land close to existing deserts being overgrazed. This means that there are too many animals to be supported by the limited vegetation. When the vegetation has been destroyed, the land will then eventually turn into desert. The second is climate change. Now, in some desert regions, such as the Sahel and the southern fringe of the Sahara Desert, climate change is resulting in drier conditions and unreliable rainfall. On average, it now rains less than it did 50 years ago, which again makes the soil very dry and easily broken up. We've also got deforestation. Once trees are cut down, the roots no longer bind the soil together. The soil eventually will break up, and because there isn't any organic matter falling, the soil then becomes very, very infertile. It makes it very difficult again to grow crops. We've also got a lack of water. Again, linked maybe towards deforestation, and climate change. And as climate change is changing and we have unreliable rainfall, lack of water will leave the ground very barren. And as you can see in the image there, the soil begins to crack and fracture. And it becomes very, very difficult again to grow crops in those areas. Overcultivation is another reason or another cause of desertification. And this results from the need to produce more and more food. And this leads to the soil becoming very exhausted. And eventually it will just turn to dust and again become infertile. The same with overgrazing. Once cattle eat the land or eat the grasses and plants which are found there, What happens is that, very similar to overcultivation, the soil just becomes exhausted. There are no nutrients left, and what happens eventually is that again it becomes dry and infertile. It means that it's very difficult to grow crops. So we've identified the causes, as you can see here now, and we've linked them now to how that might lead to desertification. So just make sure you've got those 6 down in your book, just as a recap as to what we did last lesson. So we're going to focus today on the Sahel part of Africa. And you can see that by looking at the 2 maps here. It's in an area which is at risk of desertification. And it's a vast semi-arid region of Africa, separating the Sahara Desert to the north and the tropical savannas to the south. It includes countries like Senegal, Mali, Burkina Faso, Algeria, Niger, Nigeria, and it extends from the west across to the east. So just take a minute now to have a look and identify whereabouts we're focusing on when we're going to look at managing and reducing desertification within this area. So just pause the PowerPoint now to look at the 2 images that have been provided for you. The flow diagram in front of you here just highlights why the Sahel suffers from desertification. And we can see it quite clearly, because if we look just below the term desertification there, we can see 2 causes that we've looked at previously: increase in population and increase in cattle. So we're looking at things like overgrazing. What happens when we've got an increase in population is that we get deforestation taking place for firewood. Because of that deforestation taking place, the roots no longer hold the soil together. This means that the soil is not protected by the weather. And because of that, we get loose topsoil which is blown away by wind, leading to soil erosion. And this is why an area would suffer from desertification. Again, we can link that towards the increase in cattle and overgrazing. Grassland graze becomes more intense. The roots may be eaten as well as the grass. Less vegetation means less protection from the weather. Similar to what happened with the firewood, loose topsoil is blown away by the wind, creating soil erosion, which leads to desertification. So just by looking at that flow diagram there, we can see how it happens, just linking it back to the causes. So our main task for today is to look at the different strategies that can be used to prevent desertification. You're going to be given 2 different pieces of information. You're going to have a video and an information sheet. You'll also notice on one of the slides, and also attached to the Google Classroom's page, is a table where the information can be collected and then put into. So what I'd like you to do first is to watch the videos and identify first the ways to reduce desertification. You'll then start to have a look at how will it reduce desertification. So think about explaining that process. You also need to look for real life examples. So whereabouts is this occurring? The second task requires you then to read through the additional information sheets and gather any other information which you could input into the table. So the text with there goes into a little more detail about the different ways that we can reduce it. Once you've completed the table, you'll see that there is a 4th column which says how effective do you think it will be to reduce desertification. What you must do here is to have a look through, and you'll see this in the challenge section below. You must identify the positives and negatives of each of the strategies and decide on how effective you believe the strategy to be. This is where we're thinking about the AO3. We're evaluating the work that we've done and the information that we've collected within today's lesson. On this slide here, we've got the table that you can use to complete the task that I've just explained. You can either do this into your books, or you can see that the PowerPoint is editable and you could maybe type that information in, which might be a little more challenging because you might have to watch the video, remember the information and then input it. The same with the information sheets. You can either write this information straight into your book, or you can read through the information and then type it into the boxes that you can see above there. Thank you very much everybody for the hard work that you've put in over the past 9 or 10 weeks. I'm really looking forward to Monday when everyone's coming back into school, and it'll be great to see everybody. Thanks again everybody. Keep up the hard work.